Hello, Gen Con fans. Welcome back to our discussion about artists that will be at the Gen Con art show this summer. This video is a little bit different. We are going to be featuring just one artist. His name is Mark Poole. He is one of the OGs from some of these games. So we'll be focusing just on his art for this video. He has done a lot of art, and I'm only going to be able to focus on this video on a few of those games. I'm going to have content in this video from BattleTech, Flesh and Blood, Legend of the Five Rings, Magic, Middle-earth CCG, Shadowfist, Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, and Warlord: Saga of the Storm. These 8 games are some of the ones he's done quite a few pieces from, and they kind of showcase some different points in his career and kind of his style evolution over time. So I wanted to feature just these ones. There are a ton of other games that I'm not able to feature. So he has worked on Anachronism, Battle Lords, Deadlands Doomtown, Dragonstorm, Dune, Fantasy Adventures, Galactic Empires, Guardians, Cryptic, Mortal Kombat, Mystic Empire, Mythos, Netrunner, Redemption, Tempest of the Gods, Warhammer 40k, as well as World of Warcraft, and I will not be featuring these games. This was a hard decision for me to make. So far, I've put as much work as I could find for artists out there. And part of the reason I decided not to do some of these games was, one, because of time. It's getting close to Gen Con and I'm running really close on my timelines. But also because some of these games he had very little work for. For example, he only did one World of Warcraft card. There's also some games that are just so old that they're very difficult to find information on. Some of these games don't have searchable databases. So this might become one of the projects I work on in the future, trying to find all these games and be able to kind of sort through them better and find out more about the artists that work on these games. Because I think it's sad that some of these games are so difficult to look into for people who are interested. So Mark did a lot of work on these, but we're not going to be looking at those ones, unfortunately, in this video. Just as a reminder, Gen Con is coming up. It is the largest tabletop gaming convention in North America. It runs from July 31st to August 3rd this year. I hope to see you there, but we're going to be focusing just on the art show, or sometimes what we call Artist Alley. This is where artists register as art show attendees. They get to come and show off some of their work. They also are available to sign autographs for your cards. Many of them offer services for things like shadow signatures. Some of them will do little doodles on your cards, different things like that. They typically do charge for signatures, and they usually charge more for some of these more special versions of their signatures. So those are some of the things available to you. Many of them will also have things like originals or prints, things like that you can purchase as well. So a little bit about Mark. He is best known for working on the original set of Magic. We'll see many of those cards in this video. He also has art featured in at least 23 card games that I could find. There may be more, but that's what we have so far. As I mentioned, we'll only be showing 8 in this video. His style has actually changed pretty dramatically, and I think you'll see that in some of these games. It's kind of interesting. He went from a very focused kind of art where it was mostly just that focal point that he was doing a lot of work on, and then the backgrounds was pretty barren in a lot of these pieces. And then as you see some of his more current art, he really has adapted to the different styles of card games going forward. So it really does kind of epitomize that shift that we've seen in card game art, specifically from kind of basic bare bones type stuff to very beautiful, complex pieces. Some people like that older style, some people like the newer style, but Mark was able to do both, and he kind of epitomizes the style for a lot of these games over the course of his career. Okay, let's go ahead and go right into the games, shall we? Our first game that we'll be talking about is BattleTech CCG. This game has 21 cards that were illustrated by Mark. It was published by Wizards of the Coast. It's kind of similar to Magic. A lot of games at this time were basically just Magic dupes with different properties that they were using. There are some differences, of course. This ran from 1995 to 2001. The cards, actually, I found out, are not actually considered canon for the BattleTech universe. So kind of an interesting factoid for those that are into the mech history and lore behind this specific universe. He has, like I said, 21 cards, so let's just go ahead and go into them. This first page, I really like some of the art here. I really like this wolf one. It's kind of cool with the face in the background here. That's at the top left here. It's called Blood of Karency? Karen Sky? Sorry. The font is a little hard to read on some of these. Not the best images I was able to find. But you can kind of see some kind of cool mech type stuff. We got some cool tanks here. A lot of these are really cool cards that you could get signed by Mark. On the next page, another round of some pretty cool mechs. I like this one at the top left, which it looks like it's probably something that's kind of a standard index, but I have no idea how to play this game. Point defense system. Kind of gives me Battle of Hoth vibes, which different IP, of course, but I thought it was kind of cool when I first saw it. And then our last page for Mark is this Victor suit here. Again, kind of basic background, not much to it. You get to see mostly just the focal point of that one mech. Up next is a game many of you will be familiar with, Flesh and Blood. This has 22 cards by Mark in it, published by Legend Story Studios in New Zealand. Many of you probably have a soft spot for New Zealand, like I do, because of the Lord of the Rings, so great to see a franchise or a company from there doing well. Their game was first released in 2019 and has since broken into the top 10 in sales for card games, which is not easy. That is a big feat, which is pretty awesome. They no longer do first edition and unlimited sets. They just have one set that they produce now for each run, which has kind of lessened some of the scalping from what I understand, but still a little bit of an issue for this game, like a lot of popular games out there right now. On the first page of cards here, you can really tell now that Mark's style has changed. This is a more modern game, and his style is much more of that modern Magic type of feel to it, but also any fantasy art has kind of modernized. I really like the Ether Wildfire one at the top left here, but there's a lot of really cool, beautiful pieces here. The Channel Thunder Step is also lovely as for that as well. Would look really cool with a signature underneath those clouds. On the next page, we also have some more kind of not dark necessarily pieces, but contrasted by some other lighter pieces as well. I like the Ring of Roses, something about that natural scene, but very controlled, like it's being controlled by some other force, is kind of cool. The Quiver of Rustling Leaves also looks kind of cool. I really like, for some reason, when there's items that are like the focal point of something. And then our last page for Flesh and Blood. This one's kind of got a dark one here, this Virulent Touch, kind of a creepy picture, but people really like that kind of art as well. So it could be a good one for a signature as well. Okay, up next is Legend of the Five Rings, lovingly called L5R. Mark has done 91 pieces for this game, so a lot more than those other two. This was published by Alderac Entertainment Group for a very long time. Now has a separate LCG from FF Fantasy Flight Games. It very much is influenced by East Asian culture. You see a lot of Chinese influence, Japanese influence, some Korean, and a couple of others, a little bit of Vietnamese and some other things like that. This has a lot of story that's built into the sets. So actually players were able to influence the story of the upcoming sets depending on how things went in major tournaments, which is a really cool feature that this game had going for it. So let's just jump into the pieces by Mark. On this first page, I really like Blessed Yumi, as well as A Welcome Reprieve. Something about the Yumi one for me feels like you can feel like how nervous this kid is, but you can also feel that he's determined to do well. I also really like Welcome Reprieve just because I like to fish, so it feels very calming to me on that one. On this next page, we've also got some really cool pieces. I really like I said earlier, I like items, so the Doji armor kind of sticks out to me. But I also really like, I don't know how to say this, the Daidoji Tobai. He's got like this fireball going on. His armor is really cool looking. So another really great piece that could look really cool with Mark's signature on it. And then on this third page, we have some other really great options. This one, it's kind of interesting. You can see the difference between his style change in some of these. So like you have Fort on a Hill down here, which is pretty simple. And then you compare it to Fortress of the Bear, for example, And you can kind of see that stylistic change that happened with the game as well as with Mark himself. On to the next page, the 4th page of our L5R exploration here. I really like Isawa Kyoko. The background is kind of intriguing and interesting to me, but also just the movement of how the clothes are draping off her hair, things like that looks pretty cool to me. I also just really like the top right here, Kokuri's lands. Really cool structure there that could look cool with maybe a lighter color signature on it. On this page, I really like the Nodachi, but what I think would be really cool is if you look at Maws of Stone, it compares very closely to some of the mountains that he has for Magic, which we'll be seeing soon. I think it'd be really cool to get both of those signed and be able to keep them together and show kind of the differences and the similarities between those two games and Mark's work in particular on them. On the next page, we've got some other really great pieces. I like the Secret from the Ratling. That nature scene with the snow, I think, is kind of cool. Would look really good with a signature, I think. Also reinforce the line to me. I like the ones that tell stories, and you can kind of feel like this trepidation from this warrior wanting to go into battle. One thing to notice on this page, Sunken City might be misattributed to Mark. I included it here just in case, but that might actually be another artist, and we're not exactly sure who that artist is. If you know, let me know in the comments. I like on this page the Sting of the Wasp. It kind of brings in some of those fantasy elements that maybe we haven't seen on as many of Mark's pieces for this game. But there's also some really great pieces here, a lot of that architecture, which is fun. Up next, we actually have a lot that I really like on this one. Legion's Might, I think, is really cool with those bows that they're pulling back with their legs. Terasaka looks really epic, and I love the trees in the background. Through the Waterways also looks really cool, going through the tunnels here in the sewer system. So some really great pieces to choose from there. And on the next page, we're coming close to the end of our L5R stuff from Mark. Some other really cool ones. I like the unexpected reinforcements here. You just kind of see this battlefield of carnage, which is kind of sad, but also really kind of interesting and cool. But some other really great pieces here. The sensei here, Sujaiken sensei, looks very mystical and interesting. And our very last L5R card, Yoritomo Mikaru. I really like the piece here where you can see the movement of this character. Kind of a drab background, but that really just draws you into the movement and motion of that character. Up next is a game that shouldn't need much of an introduction for most people, Magic the Gathering. Mark did 203 cards. I say did, he's actually still working on Magic pieces. This was the first patented trading card game ever. Mark was part of the first set in 1993, and he also has work in the newest set coming out in 2025. Just not related to Mark, but we all know Magic has some cards that have some pretty high price tags. Some of Mark's do have some pretty high price tags, but a mint Black Lotus recently sold for about $3 million. So there's some money to be had with some of these older cards out there. On our first page of Magic cards, I actually really like Ambush Party. That one to me is a very interesting piece, but you'll really start to see on Magic, because he has worked on it for so long, there's stark differences between some of these pieces. So like, for example, if you look at Ancestral Recall here and then compare it to Ancient Cornucopia, you can see a vast change in the style and kind of the focus of the art. Doesn't mean one's better than the other, but they are very different from each other. On this page, I really like the Balduvian Barbarians. Just a really classic Viking style look to them, and I think that's kind of fun. Up next, I really like Cancel here, as well as the Brainstorm. It's cool to see both versions of this because you can see the line work that went into kind of the foundations of the piece. I think that's really cool to see kind of that structure being built on that piece of work from Mark. Up next is a fan favorite, Counterspell. Of course, is going to be a popular one. I also really like the colors in Country Roads right next to it. So both of those would be some great options if you can find a Counterspell to get signed, that is. Here I really like these 3 Elven cards at the bottom right. I think that would be cool to have that trio all signed. But other great options here as well. I really like the stuff here from Fallout. There's a few of those cards that we'll see later as well. On this page, I think Fear is kind of an iconic piece, but we'll also start to see some of our first lands from Mark coming up. I really like seeing lands signed just because they're so useful, but they're also just kind of the foundation of the game, so I think that's kind of fun to see. Exploration is also gorgeous, so another good option there. As I mentioned, we'll start to see some lands here, so we've got a bunch of forests from Mark here that you could choose. I also really like the Foul Orchard, just kind of another foresty scene. Bottom right here, we've got Gemstone Caverns. This is a piece from the very newest set of Magic. As of the release of this video, it's coming out at the same time as Gen Con. The next page actually has Mark's only serialized card, Howling Mine. I also really like the Halls of Mist card. Both of those are kind of that classic style of art, but really quite interesting to look at. Here we've got a whole bunch of islands, and again, you get to see the stark contrast between the different periods of his career here. We've got one, the bottom right one here, that is one of the very first ones, as well as some of these newer ones here that you can kind of see the differences on. It'd be really fun to get a bunch of these signed by Mark. This next page fills out the last of the islands, and it's got a couple of the OG ones there. I really like Jump as a classic one, and this really big eagle is pretty cool looking too. This next one, my favorite by far, is a Laughing Hyena. I really like cards that interact with the framing of the card a lot, but this one also has a joke in it. It's got a hilarious ability, the art's fun. This is a really cool one. This page starts off our mountains, and he has a bunch of those, and they're really cool. This first one is actually one that I compared to that one mountain card from L5 Art earlier. One thing to notice here as well is Mark doesn't get very many borderless cards because a lot of his art was before they did those special treatments, so Mishra's Factory here is another cool one for that. This page obviously has a lot of mountains, and like I said earlier, you can see the difference between some of those older ones compared to some of his newer ones, and the change of style is pretty stark. Now on this page, I really like Painted Bluffs because it reminds me of some of the landscapes that you find in my home state, Utah. I also really like the Plains cards because they've got some lovely colors on them that I think would look really cool with the signature on them. And with another Utah connection, we've got this Plains here with some little doodles from Post Malone, and he lives here in Utah. I also really like the raccoon token. It's just adorable, but also fierce. This page probably has my favorite piece from Mark. Samut, the Driving Force, just has some beautiful colors in the background. She's got a fierce expression. I just really like this look. Also, Skullstorm is a pretty cool one too. On this page, I really like the Stone Coil Serpent. It reminds me of what would happen to Onyx if you fed him too many veggies and you turned into a plant Pokemon. Here we have Mark's Only Swamps. And for some reason, this first one really catches my eye. There's something about it that's just kind of haunting and yet beautiful and kind of creepy all together at once. This page has a bunch of kind of creepy ones. Like, I don't want to think about transmutation font very much. One thing to notice here, though, is that the Urza's Tower starts here, and there's actually several versions of this, and I'll show you some more on the next page. But I think it'd be really cool to get them all and get them signed. So this page will finish off the Urza's Towers. So we've got the mountains, the plains, and the coastline. The last page had the forest. So I think all four of those would be an awesome collection. And we've made it to the last Magic page. There's a couple of really cool ones here. I like the Yavimaya Coast. Lots of pretty colors there. But Wild Growth is a classic. And we've made it to Middle-earth CCG. This has 21 cards by Mark. This game was first published in 1995 by Iron Crown Enterprises, just abbreviated as ICE a lot of the time. The first card game to be set in Middle-earth, which is really cool. There's obviously been others since. And it also includes work from several of the original Tolkien artists, so people who worked on some of the original publications for different books and other things. There's quite a few lovely landscapes here on this first page. One thing I noticed is this game doesn't seem to have a whole lot of named characters, so Damrod might be a cool one to get signed. On this page, I think Lost in Dark Domains would be really cool with a silver signature. Also, the Raven in the top right is a really beautiful piece. And the last Middle Earth piece is kind of a fun one. It's got Tom startling the hobbits, so that's also a really cute one. The next game is Shadowfist, and this is one that has 57 cards from Mark in it. It was first published in 1995 by Daedalus Entertainment, and you'll notice a lot of these cards are very much inspired by Hong Kong action films, the kung fu craze that was going on during that time. It also has had several Kickstarter relaunch attempts that have had varying degrees of success. And just on this first page, you can see that action movie, kung fu movie type vibe going on here. And we start off with a pretty violent one, cutting loose ends. Yeah, that's rough. On this page, I really like the family restaurant because it just looks like this peaceful setting, but you know something bad is about to happen in that place. Here we run into our first Centurion in this. So this Lucius Centaurus, I have so many questions about this setting. If you know this setting, you should comment in here and let us know kind of why there's so many different veins of storytelling here, but kind of cool to see the Centurion armor there. And on this page, we have this elephant. It's kind of cool, but really, we have a Centurion with pistols, so I think that one gets my vote for being the one to get signed. This page has another kind of funny one for me. The home front. For me, I'm just imagining these guys like after this big battle, the next weekend, they're like having to spackle the walls and repaint everything and grumbling about being attacked there the whole time because they had to spend their weekend fixing it. This page has a couple of creepy ones, not to mention the dude in his underwear, but I kind of like the Throne of Skulls one. Kind of it gives off a creepy, cool vibe. Okay, we're getting closer. Next game is Vampire: The Eternal Struggle. This one has 31 cards from Mark. This was published in 1994 by Wizards of the Coast, and it originally was under the name Jihad. They ended up changing that because most of you probably realize why. This was actually the third CCG ever, and it shares a setting with an RPG called Vampire: The Masquerade. The art in this game kind of reminds me of portraits you might find in like some opulent mansion or something. But I really like the Eze the Demon Prince over here. Just kind of a cool look to that card. On this page, I really like Marge Khan. She looks like she's like modeling for the Gap or something, but she's actually a vampire who wants to kill you. Kind of similar on this page, Nikolai the Survivor. To me, looks like he could be like a Fast and Furious character or something, which is kind of funny. And then just one last piece. I really like the stained glass here. Also kind of looks like the candles are floating, which kind of gives it a creepy ambiance for sure. And with that, we have finally reached our last game. And for me, this is actually by far my favorite one. This is Warlord: Saga of the Storm. There are 30 cards in this game by Mark. This was first published in 2001 by Alderac Entertainment Group, usually called AEG. This uses RPG mechanics, kind of like D&D, but very simplified, and uses a rank and file system instead of normal resources. Really, really fun. Lots of cool mechanics to it. The most fun I've ever had playing a card game. This is being relaunched by a company called Kingswood Games, and actually they're going to have some events running at Gen Con with the new cards. Actually, I'll be there teaching people how to play for part of the show. So come check it out if that's not already on your plans. I told you Mark had 30 cards, and that is true, but some of the art has actually been reused. There was one edition of Warlord that came out called 4th edition, where they typically used a bunch of the older art for new cards, which is not really something that the players enjoyed, but it's also something that the new people that are running it really did not like. So we shouldn't be seeing that in the future. Couple of really cool pieces here, though. I really like Acts of Faith. Just the colors there and kind of his facial expressions. Pretty cool combo. On this next page, we have Grace Hearthpride. She is a warlord, and those are always cool to have signed, just because you're a big part of the game, of course. If you lose your warlord, you lose. So they're always out on the field during the game. Height advantage, I think, is also another funny one because it kind of subverts your expectation there. It also kind of has Obi-Wan and Anakin vibes for me. And on our very last page of cards, on this page, if I was to choose one, I think Veiled Passing is the one I would bring. It's a good card, but it also has just really cool art. But we've got a lot of lightning and different effects here, the swarm of bees. So lots of really great options you can't really go wrong with. And with that, we are finally done with all of Mark Poole's work that we had time to feature in this video. I promise the next video will not be this long, but our next artists up are Danny Schwartz, Cynthia Shepard, Joe Slucher, John Stanko, and Crystal Sully. So check back in for those ones and get your cards ready to get signed at Gen Con this summer.